Today, we're going to start our Ugly Dolls project, and you are actually going to learn how and what it's like to be a toy designer. So, as a toy designer, what we're going to pretend is that you have just been hired as an intern to design a future toy for Gund that could potentially be sold at Target. So think about you're sitting in a room, you're with all these other people who would love to be toy designers too, but only 5 can get chosen and hired where you'll get a job. So if your design is one of the 5, the top 5 chosen from all the other interns, you will receive the job at our company. So some things that you can do during this project is first, we're going to design a toy. You're going to start with 3 to 5 sketches, you're going to modify it, and then you're going to build it. Then we're going to create our own little bio for the toy and make an advertisement for it. So that way you make it a little bit more personal. Think of your favorite cards that you might have, whether it's Pokemon or baseball cards or anything or a toy that you get. There's a story behind them. And then we're going to learn how to vote, and we'll have some of the other grade levels help us out with this too. So let's learn about some facts about toy designers. You know, everyone starts off in different ways, but you always start off with a sketch, and it's not a perfect sketch. It's just a quick get your idea on the paper, and then you build from there. Most toy designers start thinking about, okay, what will this toy then eventually be made out of? What are the moving parts? What are the colors I'm considering? How big is this toy going to be? Is the cost going to be too much when I use those things? So there's a lot of things that take place in the process, and you're constantly fixing it all back up. Some fun facts about a career in being a toy designer is this little website from theartcareerproject.com discussing what it's like to become a toy designer. If you want to go and look at that website, they have some bios of some actual toy makers that you could read what they started doing, how they became a toy designer, and where they're working. So some fun facts here, as you'll see on here, is the global toy market is over $84 billion. Just think of your favorite toy growing up that you've had already and what toys you wish were made, and much, much more. So looking at this, the average hourly wage and different things, you can see how the salaries go. The toy industry says that it predicts the following trends, and I know we're in 2017 right now, but just kind of take a look at what they predicted before and see if any of that came out, and if you have that toy. So here are the world's biggest toy companies, obviously Melissa and Doug, Mega Bloks, Leapfrog. You've probably seen several of these. I know almost everybody owns Legos or Mattel. Mattel makes more than just Barbies. It makes a lot of other toys. So this was interesting. Some of the most influential toys according to the Time magazine. So back in the 1920s, it was yo-yos, then finger paints, the Slinky. The 1950s, Barbie came out, and also Mr. Potato Head. 1960s were those rubbery creepy crawlers. In the 70s it was the Rubik's Cube. 80s was a glow stick. In the 90s was the Beanie Baby and then Furby. And 2000s was Bratz and Zuzu. So you can probably think of what 2010s and maybe what the 2020s will hold. So that is that. So what are ugly dolls? And when you look on here, you're going to see that Ugly Dolls were created by 2 people, Sunmin Kim and David Horvath. So how it began is David actually created all of the ugly art in his Ugly Doll book, but it started when Sunmin had to move to Korea, and obviously this made him very sad. So it says here, so David wrote many mushy I miss you letters to Sunmin and drew a little wage character at the bottom of the page. So she turned the drawings into a doll as a gift for David, and together they created an ugly doll, a product called Ugly Doll. Now, Sun Ming and David are married and they spend all of their time making the ugliest art the world has ever seen. So, what they did is he drew all these cute little pictures at the bottom of his letters to her, and she turned it into a doll. And that became something that everybody really enjoyed. The movie Ugly Dolls came out after I had started this, but I liked it. And the reason I chose this is it's your first sewing project. You might have something in your head that you really want to create, but it might not come out perfect. And that's okay, because that's what we do in art, right? Is we practice, we learn, and we have an idea, but however it comes out in the end is the best that we did. And as long as you had fun making it and you tried, that works out. So here I recorded on a Screencastify a while ago, just some examples that were popping up for ugly dolls. You can see there are a variety of different types of ugly dolls. Gund has picked up on the Ugly Doll brand, and they have created different ones with the comic superheroes and also other movies, so like Dorothy. There's a Hello Kitty in here as well. Bands, Star Wars, mummies. There's the Hello Kitty, Batman. Some ugly dolls have buddies, and more. All right, so now that we've looked at ideas, what I would like you to do in your sketchbook or on a piece of paper, I typically have us break it down into 2 days where we interview first graders and get an idea of our target audience. But we're just going to go in and make what we want this year. And so I want you to come up with, 3 to 5 sketches on this paper. Ignore what the saying day 1, day 2, just draw. So you can see an example a student of mine did last year of 4 different sketches. Anything goes at this point. You're just getting your idea on the page. So I want you to play with that idea. Draw what comes to mind. If you want it to be a character, do you want it to be pizza? Do you want it to be a donut? It could be anything that you're thinking. And we'll talk about how we're going to modify it next. So now in the design process, you've got your ideas down. What you're going to do is make modifications. Toys are obviously not made off of the first design. They are modified, they're changed, and they're developed towards the interest of the audience, and it's constantly something that's in the works, just like a car. You're going to always, as somebody's designing a car, they're going to come across different things that work and don't work, and that's why we have new models of cars come out every year, new updated games, software updates for computers, you name it. Nothing's perfect the first time, and you just roll with it, right? So consider looking at your favorite design. Is this something that you can cut out and sew? That's the first thing I want you to look at. How difficult does it look? The second thing is we want to take that image and you want to make it simple. You want to save the details for things that you can either draw, paint on, or cut little scraps and glue on. So take a look at this image up here of this ugly doll. It is basically 2 pieces. It was cut all in one piece, and then it was sewed the front and the back together. Last, they added on the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the tongue. So here are some examples of modifying. You can find many sewing tutorials and guides online where people give you their patterns for free. There are also patterns that you need to purchase, but this gives you a general guideline. So here would be a llama, for example, and a lot of them show how to sew it with a sewing machine or stitching, etc. That's not what we're going to really work on. That's something that we can add on because it's our first sewing plushie experience, right? So here you would need 2, a front and a back, identical to make the llama's body. And then you would need 2 pairs of ears, the hair, and then optional is a blanket that you could cut and then you would drape it over your llama. This koala, they did a different way. they decided they wanted to stuff it in two areas so the stuffing wouldn't move from one area to another. Again, everybody makes their own way. So they have one piece of the koala, and then they have the front of the koala's body, the head, right? And then the rest of the details. So what they did is they sewed the body onto the main part with the extra little details. And then they sewed the head with the eye and nose and so forth on last and stuffed those two areas. I know we're into Among Us. Here is a monster one somebody made, but it looks very similar to that. So you'd make two of the same body shape, and then you would just make the face part. Or if you wanted to add a hat or different things, you would add that on. So what these look like is, if you take a good look at it, is it's a silhouette. You want to take the shape first. So don't draw eyes on, don't draw any of those things on what you're going to cut, because we're going to throw that piece of paper away. And you're not going to draw all that on to one piece of fabric. Here's Yoda and here's Pikachu. So you can see how that all works. When you're doing this, and I'll leave this up here to give you an example as well, is you want to make it the size of your paper. The felt that I'm going to give you is an 8.5 by 11 sheet. And what you want is to have two of those. You want to have them the exact same size. If you are doing this at home, you can go to Joann Fabrics or any of those stores and actually choose the size of the fabric that you would like to make. And you just make them identical. So for this one, for the pug, it's obviously larger than the paper. And the directions that you could print with this is you would make cut 2 of the body, right? Here it says cut 1 for the outer face, cut 1 for the inside. It's the black part of the pug's face. And then you've got, all the other features, and it tells you how many to cut. The ears, they wanted to make it plush. So they made 2 of the same ears, which they stuffed and then sewed on last. And they did the same thing for the tail. What we're going to do is, I would like your ears and the tail and the body to all be in one. Fill it on that whole paper. And then we'll add, draw on your sketchbook exactly what you're thinking of additional pieces. And here you can see they wrote a list of the materials. What do they need to cut? And what colors of the materials that they would like. Here are some student examples to also give you ideas. These are some ones that my students did 2 years ago, and I have several more that I can show you. But you've got a variety. It's just one shape. They chose 2 different colors for a lot of them, or they're similar. And then you draw on the details or add on. So if you wanted to have a cookie, you would cut one shape of the cookie. We would sew that onto your character and then put a little stuffing underneath of it, because you don't need a backing. It's attached to your character. So these are just some different things. And here's another example. When I had a student who wanted to make Snoopy, when they drew out the outline of Snoopy, it was just a white blob. It was very hard to see, as you can tell. And then once they flipped it over and drew on the ear and drew on the eye, the nose, and the collar, you could see it. They did the same thing with Woodstock, the bird. So they folded actually yellow, cut it to the shape that they wanted, and then drew on those details as well. So you can also notice that you've got a penguin. They added on a hat by just cutting one piece of black and gluing it on so that you don't have to stuff that. I also have a taco and some other monsters, a bunny. All those extra details that make it what it is comes after. As always, any of my tutorials where I break down from past years are located on my YouTube channel, Mrs. Holland Art Room, and it's all under the playlist Ugly Dolls. And I go really slow and have it at your own pace right there. In this video today, I'm going to show us how to make 2 different types of plushies. One with glue, and then also one where you can tie. It's a tying method, But what I wanted to say is if you want to learn how to do the sewing, like the ugly dolls that we typically make, those videos, as I showed a little bit before, are located on my YouTube channel. They're broken down in very simple, longer segments to go at your own pace. And I did that when I had my centers in the art room where people would, or students would be able to work at their own pace. So here, I just want you to take your time and we're going to play with a no sewing method. So these are some things that you can do from home and create as many as you would like. Now let's get started with our project. So we're going to need a template, your fabric or felt, glue, and some scissors for this. So using your felt, here I am going to use one piece and I'm going to fold it in half because I am making a smaller sized one for this video. If you feel like making a smaller size or you realize your template is a little bit smaller, you can also do the same thing here. So what I am doing is I'm taking my template that I created and I'm going to trace it using a piece of chalk onto my fabric, as you can see here. And this is something that can eventually wipe off, or I could just flip it over and you don't have to see it again. Once you have it traced, take out your scissors and cut out that shape. You'll have a top and a bottom, and then grab some other colors. I just took off a square or a shape off of a larger piece, and I'm going to use those different scraps for other projects. So you can put your scraps on the side, but all those different features like the eyes, the ears, the belly, those things that you came up with, what you needed in your plan, we're going to use. And what I just showed, those scraps that I have from cutting out the eyes and everything else, I'm going to use that as stuffing. So here I've got my two pieces and the front and the back of my little plushie. And I'm going to then take what else I created and I'm going to place them onto my character. And I want to see how is this going to look. So this helps me before I use glue and I can see, are my eyes too big? Yep, those do look a little bit too big. So here I can go in and I can edit it by cutting it a little bit smaller. I'll save those scraps for some stuffing. You can also use it for other little features, and I'll place those on there. Don't worry if the shapes aren't exact like you want it. I think it gives it a little bit of a character when you do that too. And I had some leftover pieces from that lighter gray that I think will tie in really well. So I'm going to place those on there as some shinies. And then I kind of feel like I want a little something extra. So I cut out a heart and I glued that on as well. The type of glue you can use is your Elmer's glue, or if you have access to a glue gun, you can do that as well. So you just put a little bit of, drops, not a lot. And then the second thing is I'm going to come around, and I apologize for my head being in the way, I'm going to come around the edges and give you some hot glue just to make it go a little bit quicker. You can also use the Elmer's glue as well. And I'm going to leave, just like when you're doing a Build-A-Bear, you want to leave one area open. Don't have it where it's so close together because then it makes it more difficult to stuff. And then what you do is you just gently pat it together so that way the edges all dry. Give it a moment to dry on there as well. You can see that I always call it like the little spider webs from the glue gun, and you just easily peel those away. But wherever you choose to have your side open, typically if I'm sewing, I leave it on the bottom or on the side. Now comes the stuffing part. So take those scraps that you had that are too small to use for other things, and we're going to reuse those. We're going to place those inside of our little creation. So you can use your fingers and stick it in there. I also sometimes grab a pencil and use that to kind of push and maneuver where I want the stuffing and things to go. I also have some of the polyester stuffing that you can find pretty much anywhere. I had gotten mine on Amazon, but you can use anything to really, cotton balls, anything that you really have, even beans or rice would be fun too. So I'm using the end of my pencil, the eraser end, so I don't poke a hole. And I'm just moving and gently, little bit by little bit, you don't want to take a lot all at once, stuffing my plushie, as you can see. Use your finger, move it. Where do you want it to be? The thicker parts, the thinner parts, the arms, the head, etc. Once you feel you've stuffed in enough, take out your glue. It could be the Elmer's glue or even the glue gun, and you finish gluing it all together. Now, the second way that you can create your own stuffy if you don't have glue is you'll trace your template on your project. And then I just use the chalk to draw a bunch of lines. These lines will all be ones that you tie together. So think of those no-sew blankets made out of fleece. I know there's like lots of no-sew projects that you can get at different stores. My daughter has an avocado one. And what you're going to do is very simply take these two strands and you're going to tie them together. So when you do this, you're going to tie just like you do your tying of your shoe. And I usually do two of them. But sometimes, using this thicker felt fabric, one should be able to hold it pretty well. So you can give it one good pull and tie. Take your time. If you find that they're too difficult to tie, what you can do is cut them a little bit more. But the goal is that you're just going to work your way around the shape that you had cut and tie those. At the very end, you can go and make them even smaller by, trimming these long strands. But you want to work in piece by piece because it does get a little tricky if you skip around to see what you might have forgotten. This is what keeps the stuffing in. So as you go, just slowly grab and tie. It's really good practice as well. Like we discussed with our previous one, leave a little bit untied so you have an area that you can add your stuffing in. So here you can see I've got the outline of it. You can go around at this point if you want before you stuff it and just trim some of those really super long strands. You can make it, really close or not. Just make sure that it's tied nice and tightly so that you're able to retie it should it come undone, or do a doubling where you tie it and double it so it's a double knot and it doesn't come undone. So once you have done so, remember that area that we haven't filled in yet, or if you noticed, hey, it's too tight for me to stick my finger in, undo a couple of those knots. That's the nice part about this. So once you get that, the one area that you left untied, get your stuffing, and you're going to stuff it just like we did before. Remember, take small portions and put it through. That way we're not ripping and we're not undoing any of the knots and putting stress on our stuffy that we just created, our ugly doll or our plushie. So once you get it to the desired thickness that you want it to be, you've used your finger to push it around or a back of a pencil or something that's not sharp that could poke a hole, then you'll just finish by tying it up and adding on those details.